picture fascism, you're probably imagining something like this. Rows and rows of soldiers marching in formation, a symbol of power, both of military might and of power over minds. There's so many of them, so loyal, so united. Movies like Indiana Jones, or indeed Star Wars, use this visual shorthand to invoke this idea of fascism. The Empire is all-powerful, much too powerful for a single individual to make a dent in their regime. Until, of course, a magic farm boy comes along. This imagery is directly pulled from actual Nazi propaganda films. The shots of rows and rows of armed shoulders marching, low angles to create that image of power and superiority. It all draws quite directly from the work of a known friend of Adolf Hitler, Leni Riefenstahl's Triumph of the Will. To quote fellow YouTuber Dan Olsen's video on the subject, this, right here, is exactly what they wanted you to think of when you thought of them. So, I don't know if you heard, but Andor rules. It's not just the best Star Wars show, it's a great show, period. That's not to say I think you could or should remove the show from the framework of Star Wars. Being in the Star Wars universe is what allows the show to pull off some of its most interesting tricks. It manages some incredible world building for Star Wars, and makes the universe feel real in a way it never has before, especially the Empire. The Empire are kind of the go-to example of a generic bad guy. They're just evil, they hate fun, they're run by an evil hate wizard, and that's fine, I'm not saying that as a negative, I love old Palpy, but I would never accuse him of being a realistic villain. Andor is built on the idea of taking the Empire and making them make sense, asking the question, okay, if an evil hate wizard took over the galaxy, how would that system actually function, and what would the lives of the people living under that system actually look like? Despite the name, Andor is very much an ensemble piece, with many different characters spread across all parts of the galaxy, showing us in detail 4 different perspectives on the Imperial Galaxy. We have the lower class population, Andor himself and his friends and family on the planet Ferrix. We have the middle class, primarily represented by the horrible little incel Cyril. We have the upper class, represented by Mon Mothma and her family. And finally, we have the Empire itself, represented by the Imperial Security Bureau agent Dedra. Each of these stories gives us an insight into the Empire, how it works, how it doesn't work, and more broadly, the mechanics that are required for a fascist regime to function. It's a prison. It's all a prison. So where better to start our discussion than an actual prison? Narkina 5 is a dystopian nightmare of a prison, a horrifically well-designed system built for the sole purpose of endless exploitation. People are arrested on menial, petty, and usually non-existent crimes, and sent to an isolated base in an ocean surrounded by desert wastelands. They're thrown in a room with 50 other men and told to work on a menial repetitive task where the winners are rewarded with flavour in their food paste and the losers are punished with torture. It's a clean and polished nightmare of white walls and rigid, repetitive order. In essence, it's a perfect distillation of life under fascism, and I'm not just talking about the extremely on-the-nose imagery of a group of men standing naked as a cloud of gas is released from the ceiling. The question to ask is, why is the prison set up in this way? What function do each of these intricate systems serve? Why are the prisoners competing against each other? Why do they put a suicide floor in the hallway at night? Why do they put one of the prisoners in charge of the rest? It's all to distract the prisoners from the truth of their situation. They make it so each prison block is competing with all the others because when they lose, they aren't mad at the wardens, they're mad at the winning block. When they're pushed to the limit working on a tedious and intensive task, they aren't mad at the wardens, they're mad at the fellow prisoner yelling orders at them. When someone decides they've had enough and ends it all, they aren't mad at the prison for driving him to suicide, they're mad at him for doing it, because now they have to deal with his dead body smelling up the place all night. The prisoners outnumber the guards 100 to 1, and the entire game is making sure that they never realise what that means. Which they do by making sure they're too focused on fighting each other, because if they ever stop fighting each other, well, there's only one way out, as they say. The downfall of the prison is arrogance, the belief that their systems are too good to fail. They don't listen to what the prisoners are saying to each other, not only because doing so would be almost impossible, but because they feel like they don't need to. They are beneath notice. They're just workers, closer to sheep and cows than people, and you don't listen in on what the cows are talking about. Narkina 5 is almost cartoonishly dystopian. They leave the bodies to rot overnight. They don't actually release anyone and just send them to another prison. And when the prisoners realise that, they kill them all to keep it secret. It all seems a bit much sometimes, but the truth is, the systems that drive Narkina 5 are the same systems that drive the rest of the galaxy. Ferrix is the opposite of Narkina 5. It is exceptionally normal, a small town of working class folks with their own cultures and beliefs. They, like the prisoners, are beneath the Empire's notice, and they like it that way. So, when someone in their community attracts the Empire's attention, they get upset.
Have you turned in?
By who?
By who? By anyone? People blame you for what happened. You killed 2 corpos and came home to hide. Put the entire town at risk and now there's Imperials on the street.
The blame game is an important frame here. When he comes home, Andor is shunned and not wanted anymore because his antics are what led the Empire to occupy the city. The blame is not placed on the Empire, the ones actually doing the bad things and committing atrocities. They are viewed as a constant and immovable piece on the board. Rather, it's the person that drew their attention that's the issue. For the people at the bottom of the social ladder, like the people of Ferrix, there's no beating the Empire, no fighting them. There's just behaving, just doing what you're told and hoping you don't ever catch their attention. This attitude is ideal for the Empire. There are way more people on Ferrix than there are Imperial troopers on Ferrix, but the trick is making sure they don't realise what that means, and if they do, kill them all before they can tell anyone else. The hope of the people at this level is that they are beneath notice, that the Empire will be too busy with the people actively fighting, or on people who produce something more worthwhile to their cause, and that they can simply live their normal lives. Control relies on that impulse. 1 or 2 uppity cities can be controlled, but if every city rebelled all at once, then the Empire would be screwed. Of course, the idea that Ferrix could stay unnoticed forever is a fallacy. If it wasn't Andor, it would be someone else. Fascism requires an enemy. It requires someone to assert power over. They actively seek out people to impress. What starts as, at least it's not us, becomes, at least it's not me, and then eventually, if I do what I'm told, then it won't be me, because the idea of fighting back, that it's even an option, seems impossible.
I mean, it's so confusing, isn't it? So much going wrong, so much to say, and all of it happening so quickly. The pace of repression outstrips our ability to understand it, and that is the real trick of the Imperial thought machine. It's easier to hide behind 40 atrocities than a single incident.
The system relies on a lack of martyrs, overwhelming the news with stories of what happens to the disobedient. A number so large it becomes difficult for the mind to process. It becomes mundane. It becomes normal. The idea that you could ever fight against it becomes a ridiculous notion. You become trapped in a horrific situation, with no hope of escape, just the day-to-day drudgery. A prison. That's the people at the bottom. What about those at the top? Mon Mothma is as close to the top as it's possible to get. Not only is she a government official, a member of the Imperial Senate, she's also rich, the heiress to an extremely wealthy family. She lives a life of luxury, a large, fancy apartment, lush dinner parties, impeccable fashion, and a very shiny space car complete with a personal valet. And yet, despite all of these comforts, something isn't right. Something that most of her peers are too comfortable or too scared to notice. Where Andor and his friends have the luxury of being ignored by the Empire, those in the upper echelons of society do not. Where those at the bottom can get away with things that the Empire doesn't see, a single slip-up, a single wrong word, or a single sign of disobedience means the end for those in the public eye. Wealth does not offer the same protection and power under fascism that it does under other systems. Fascism demands an enemy, and it does not care where that enemy comes from. Instead, that wealth becomes a prison. At least it does if you don't believe in the cause anyway. Being successful under fascism means ignoring the atrocities being committed in the name of your comfort, because if you don't, if you try and take a stand, then you'll very quickly join that list of atrocities. It's a gilded cage. The Empire does not like Mon Mothma. They don't like anyone with the potential to undermine their power and control. They're looking for any excuse to get rid of her in a way that does not make her a martyr. Her driver is a spy, and she doesn't even own the house she lives in. She's forced to participate in a government she hates. She's trapped. She's in a prison. Mon Mothma is a bit of an edge case, though. I mean, after all, she is actually conspiring against the Empire, even if they don't know that yet. What about the people who support the regime, the people who champion its beliefs and ideals? People like Cyril Karn. How does the Empire affect them? Now, Cyril is more than just a supporter. He's a cop, not a real member of the Empire, but he wants to be. He acts like he is. He keeps his hair nicely trimmed and custom tailors his uniform to look more proper and, well, imperial. He is without a doubt the most pathetic man in the universe.
There comes a time when the risk of doing nothing becomes the greatest risk of all. It's just one of those decisive moments, and I can't imagine a team I'd rather share it with than all of you.
Cyril's prison is in many ways the most obvious. He's no different to Andor in the eyes of the Empire, but the idea of the Empire and the idea of fascism gives him a sense of power and control over his life that he's otherwise lacking. He's a cog in the machine that thinks because he's a true believer in the cause that he deserves more than that. I mean, for real, this guy read Umberto Eco's Fascism and thought it was a life guide.
It's outrageous.
Exactly. The thought of anything less than full engagement on a case like this
Unconscionable, sir. Dereliction of duty at the minimum.
would be, wouldn't it?
Irrationalism also depends on the cult of action for action's sake. Action being beautiful in itself, it must be taken before or without any previous reflection. Thinking is a form of emasculation. Cyril views service to the state above everything else and believes that living his life by that code entitles him to the benefits of being a fascist, the luxury, the respect, and, most importantly, the power. But of course, that's not how the system works. He's not an Imperial, even if he styles himself like one, and even if he was, failure is not tolerated under fascism. In every mythology, the hero is an exceptional being, but in fascist ideology, heroism is the norm. At his lowest, we see that Cyril doesn't live that much differently to Andor, in his small house with his mother, but what Cassian sees as a warm place of family and love, Cyril sees as pathetic weakness that should not be tolerated. Fascism derives from individual or social frustration. That is why one of the most typical features of the historical fascism was the appeal to the frustrated middle class, a class suffering from an economic crisis or feelings of political humiliation, and frightened by the pressure of lower social groups. Cyril's friendship, if you can even call it that, with Sergeant Mosk is one of the most illuminating on how he views the world. They aren't friends in the traditional sense, rather, Mosk is another person who shares his values, and more importantly, strokes his ego. He doesn't really like or value Mosk as a friend, and abandons him at the first opportunity he has to increase his social standing. Since the group is hierarchically organised according to a military model, every subordinate leader despises his own underlings, and each of them despises his inferiors. This reinforces the sense of mass elitism. Okay, this isn't really relevant to the video, but I just want to point out that these two feature in my favourite scene in the whole show. It's a totally irrelevant scene that happens right in the middle of the finale, but it paints such a perfect picture of the true nature of their friendship. They have nothing in common. They have nothing to talk about. They have no interest in talking to each other, really. They swap hats because they're bored. They aren't friends. They're just two fascist wannabes who think coming here will somehow improve their social status. When he loses his job and his status, Cyril uses old family connections to get a new one, an office job, working logistics in an empty, infinite cubicle where he is unmonitored, unimportant, and forgotten, working a menial, boring task day in and day out, a prison that he is too smart not to notice, but too loyal to reject. Okay, so clearly the people at the bottom aren't benefiting from this system, the people at the top aren't either, and even the people in the middle, the people who support the regime, aren't benefiting either. But surely this system must be benefiting someone. Maybe the people inside the regime itself. Dedra is one of the most interesting characters in the show because of the way her story is framed. For the first part of her story, she's an underdog. Her colleagues don't respect her, they think she's wasting time, and they're hindering her progress even though we know that she's correct. You follow her as she tries and eventually succeeds in overcoming adversity and getting the upper hand on her rival. She's easy to root for, then she pulls out the genocide torture helmet and you get a clearer picture of what's really going on here. Dedra was never really an underdog. She's an officer at one of the highest levels of Imperial government. This petty infighting is just what the highest level of a fascist government looks like. It is deliberately competitive. Officers are given arbitrarily divided sectors of the galaxy to watch over. Their arrest quotas are compared with one another. Even if it's not written down as such, everything is designed to make it so that the officers are competing with each other.
Well played.
Thank you, sir.
Watch your back.
Fascism is a system that values power above all else, and so those who rise to power under fascism are those who have a drive to gain more and more power by any means necessary, usually by stabbing their fellow officers in the back. It's an environment that breeds paranoia. Enemies from within are just as dangerous, if not more so, than enemies from without. The idea that fascism provides safety and security to its members is a pure fantasy. Just like Mon Mothma, you're never under more scrutiny than when you're at the top. The difference is that Dedra doesn't understand that, or rather, she does, but she thinks she's safe because she's one of the people who enforce the rules, and therefore the rules don't apply to her. But the truth is, she's doomed. That same ambition that got her to where she is will eventually be used against her by someone with even more ambition. That's not to say you should pity her for it. She's a horrible person. Success under fascism means a lot of violence and cruelty. It means destroying people's lives for the sake of your own, and viewing the destruction of culture and of freedom as, good. So who does fascism benefit? The truth is, no one. Not even the Emperor is free from the paranoia and of people who should be on his side plotting his downfall. Even to those at the top, the wardens, it's a prison. We live in a world today where fascism isn't just something that happened a long time ago. It's real and it's on the rise. And that's scary. And that's why we need art like Andor that shows the realities of life under fascism. Not the gloss and glamour of marching soldiers and mad scientists, but the day-to-day drudgery of life under occupation. Because, spoiler alert, it sucks. And even if you think you're safe, you're not. No one escapes. Nobody is free.
And know this, the day will come when all these skirmishes and battles, these moments of defiance will have flooded the banks of the Empire's authority, and then there will be one too many. One single thing will break the siege. Remember this.
Thank you very much for watching, especially my very patient patrons. I promised I was going to have this video out when Andor was still relevant, but then I got horribly sick this month, and then Christmas happened, and life takes over, blah-de-blah-de-blah. But I'm back now, I've got more videos on the way, hopefully, maybe we'll see. If you enjoyed this video, it would be very helpful to me if you clicked down below at the subscribe button and left a comment and a like and shared it with 10 friends, else some demon will come and get you or whatever, I don't know. Chainmail, remember those? If you want to watch more videos... I'm running out of breath, this is because of the plague. If you want to watch more videos like this, I have plenty more Star Wars videos like this one I did recently on Rey and why her character arc went badly. Or this one here on the High Republic and why you should go read it because it's very good.